In 2011, Wizards of the Coast released the set Innistrad, a set about a gothic horror world of vampires, zombies, and werewolves with cowering townsfolk, a spooky church, and a strange focus on the moon. In 2015, From Software releases Bloodborne, a Souls-like video game set in a gothic horror world of blood, werewolves, cowering townsfolk, a spooky church, and a strange focus on the moon. Miyazaki stole Innistrad's whole vibe. Of course, Bloodborne had its own thing going on with cosmic horror. It had eldritch gods from another dimension mutating the shape of its world and forever changing its inhabitants, which is way different than that time in 2016 when Wizards of the Coast released Shadows over Innistrad and Eldritch Moon, which sees magic return to Innistrad with cosmic horror and eldritch gods from another dimension mutating the shape of the world and forever changing its inhabitants. Okay, obviously they didn't steal from one another. In art, being inspired by something is not the same as plagiarism, and these two pieces of art have had a lot of their own unique elements. But I think it's very safe to say that both of these were likely inspired by one another. Miyazaki often uses his favorite pieces of media as sources of inspiration for the bosses and enemies in his games. Bloodborne specifically started out actually as a sequel to Demon's Souls in development, evidence of which can be found in all of the cut content.
Oh my. How has this happened? Has God abandoned us for failing to show proper respect to King Alant? Oh, Mbasa.
Sick creature. May you rest in peace, Mbasa.
But at some point along the way, it shifted to be its own thing, and if I were to extrapolate here, that 4-year gap between the release of Innistrad and Bloodborne does leave plenty of room to interpret that shift as Miyazaki experiencing Innistrad and being inspired by it. Miyazaki has plainly stated that he is a huge fan of Magic the Gathering, and based on how he pitches his concepts to his teams, it wouldn't be a stretch to assume that he sometimes will just point at Magic art and Magic cards as inspiration. It's also pretty safe to say that the entire Magic design team is made up of massive gaming nerds, and so it would be pretty hard to imagine they didn't also sometimes take inspiration from the Soulsborne series. The connection between the moon presence and the way Emrakul's story goes on Innistrad is also at the very least a coincidence born out of the similar field of inspiration that both of these stories take. Those of you who are already familiar with my channel might also already know where this video is going to be going. Hey, shoo, get out of here, not yet. But I want to start this video off with something different. You see, Bloodborne is my favorite video game of all time. I even got a tattoo of the Hunter's Mark. But you see, my favorite quote-unquote game of all time is actually Magic the Gathering. So I kind of have a unique perspective of the two. As the title suggests, yeah, Bloodborne actually stole its whole vibe from Magic the Gathering. No, I'm sorry, I need to stop using clickbait language. What I mean to say is, Bloodborne was deeply inspired by one of the many worlds of Magic the Gathering. And it could be argued that Magic the Gathering has also been inspired by these Souls games. And I, as a game designer and artist, am deeply inspired by both Bloodborne and Magic the Gathering. Now, of course, you are welcome to skip to the section of the video where I talk about the thing I'm doing. But before I dive into it, if I may ask, just one small favor. Could you like this video? Maybe like hit subscribe if you'd like to see more videos where I talk about custom card game design. It's free to do so, and it really helps our channel out a ton. Thank you. Anyway, let's talk about my beloved Bloodborne. This game has inspired me in terms of storytelling, game design, and art. More so than any other piece of media or art I've experienced, and I want to pay tribute to it in the best way that I know how. Doing something that I love. So what am I gonna do? Drumroll please. Yes, you can come in now. Yes, come on in. What I plan to do, what I'm gonna do, or what I guess this video is technically already completed by the time you're watching, what I have done is reverse-areno this whole operation and make a Magic set based on Bloodborne. Universes Beyond Bloodborne. In this video, I want to go over how I made this set, my design choices, how I translated elements of the video game into a Magic set, and how I incorporated the lore itself into these designs. I also just want to talk about it as a draft experience as well, because at this point we've actually had a lot of time to play this set. So let's jump into the River of Blood left in Ludwig's wake in the Hunter's Nightmare.
A hunter must hunt.
So similarly to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Universes Beyond set, the Bloodborne one is built from the ground up to be a draft set. You can booster draft or cube draft it on Tabletop Simulator right now, actually. Link to the mod is in the description, and if you're looking for people to play it with, just join our Discord server, and it really won't be too hard to find people ready to hop into a draft with you. With that in mind, since this was built for drafting, it's important to note that I did not take any constructed formats into consideration. Not EDH, not any sort of standard or legacy format. This is actually a philosophy that I take into most of my custom Magic sets. They are not designed with standard, modern, legacy, commander, or any other constructed format in mind. And this is intentional because they're custom sets and I want them to serve their own specific purpose. I want all the designs to be catered to that goal of creating a fun and repeatable draft experience. By excluding constructed design constraints from the set's philosophy, it opens up space to create cards that would be perfect for a draft environment, but that would be absolutely broken or imbalanced and constructed. This is exactly the same philosophy I had for the Yu-Gi-Oh set. That Yu-Gi-Oh set would be nonsense if you attempted to put it in any constructed format. It has 0 mana draw to and Pot of Greed for God's sake, so no constructed, but you can play this set in any form of limited you want. Any kind of draft or even sealed if you want. It all works out pretty well. Now, unlike the Yu-Gi-Oh set, this is not anywhere near the power level of Vintage Cube. You could more accurately describe this set as a high-powered standard set, as the average common and uncommon is probably a bit on the higher power side for a standard draft set, but otherwise nothing is too out of the ordinary power level wise. This set will feel closer to a real Magic set than the Yu-Gi-Oh set did, if that makes any sense. However, this is not to say that this is a simple set. Just because I said this is closer to a real Magic set in terms of design does not mean it is just like a real Magic set. No, if I did that, I would be betraying Bloodborne and my heart. If one thing is true, it's that this set is fairly complicated. It has a lot of mechanics for a normal Magic set, and it explores some pretty weird design space that I feel really reflects Bloodborne's world and lore. Speaking of the design of this set, I should probably get into the goals, huh? See, when I do any game design at all, I like to establish my design goals right at the top. It may seem obvious, but actually many fan designers, for any game really, sometimes forget this step. And many people who critique the work of others also forget about this part. What do I mean? Well, when I say design goal, I mean the following questions. Why am I making this? What is the intended experience? Who is this for? So, what are my design goals for the Bloodborne set? Well, I am making this because I wanted to pay homage and respect the two pieces of art that have inspired me more than any others. I am making this because I love custom Magic the Gathering set design, and I want to make a Magic draft experience that evokes all the things that I love about Bloodborne in Magic. The intended experience for players is a deep and complex draft set that feels mysterious and evocative. A self-contained draft set with tons of replayability that slowly reveals new deck paths and tricks each time you play it. A set that could make people who have never played Bloodborne curious about it and maybe convince them to give it a shot. As for who this is for, well, this is the one question that I will answer with me. I am really designing the set for me. I did not spare any design concept for conventional design wisdoms, I did not simplify any of my ideas, and I didn't cut anything that I wanted to add in. As you'll see, this set has a lot of new mechanics, some of which are fairly complicated. But I was not going to compromise my desires for this set. Any piece of inspiration and excitement was implemented without worrying, oh, am I doing too much? Or would Wizards of the Coast actually do this in a set? I didn't really care. This set is overindulgent, and yes, it is doing too much, and that's exactly how I want it to be. To make this set what it is, I used a lot of resources. VaatiVidia's lore videos, the Bloodborne wiki, and several very good video essays about Bloodborne as a game. You'll see almost every character, enemy, boss, location, item, and weapon is represented in the cards. I used the lore to inform the mechanics of the cards and ripped quotes directly from characters in the game for the flavor text. Some designs strayed slightly from their in-game counterparts, but not to a degree that would be counter to the lore and design of Bloodborne itself. So without further ado, let's dive into those cards and their designs, starting with the mechanics that are going to appear in the set, new and returning. The way mechanics are designed and used in this set is meant to be more esoteric than a typical Magic set, more complexity and variability in designs. To mitigate this, I have attempted to keep the actual card text itself, particularly for commons, simple in some ways. But make no mistake, this set is 350 cards. It is large, and there are a lot of mechanics. There were many times where I considered reducing the number of mechanics, but instead I said, fuck it, I'll do whatever I want to do. and I'll put all of them in. As we get into these mechanics, I want to give you all an idea of the structure of the set. While there are your typical 2-color archetypes that draft sets have, just like everything in the set, there's a little bit of a twist. Each of the 2-color archetypes has a secret 3rd color that is given access to cards and mechanics of the archetypes that will bleed into them. Many of the mechanics are present in 3, 4, or even all 5 colors, and while there are signpost uncommons, like your average Magic draft set, much of their mechanical design also bleeds into other archetypes seamlessly. You may start out intending to build a blue-black artifacts deck and end up with a deck that can hit the Blood Moon threshold easily, so then you decide to play some green cards to make use of that. So let's get into those mechanics then, shall we? I want to start with the returning mechanics so you have a familiar starting place to get your feet under you. These should also help give you an idea of where some of the other mechanics are going to be going. I also want to emphasize that these mechanics are inspired by the world and lore of Bloodborne. The returning mechanics were chosen specifically to reflect this as well, and it's only a coincidence that 3 of the returning mechanics also appeared in previous Innistrad sets. I swear it came naturally. That was a weird laugh. I'm gonna keep it. It's a super weird laugh. First is Transform. These days, this mechanic appears all over the place. Every other set has a card or 5 that transform into a backside that is a completely different card. Most recently, at the time of recording, it was in the Lorwyn set with the legends that flip back and forth over and over again. In the Bloodborne set, transforming represents how the moon phases affect the populace, how bosses change phases, and a couple of other important game elements, some of which we'll save for the new mechanics section, but for now, much of it is very similar to the first iteration of transform cards in the original Innistrad block. Cards that start in one state as one type of card, and then flip over when certain conditions are met. In the Bloodborne set, this can appear on cards of any color, but it does appear slightly more in green and red. Take the following cards for example. The first transform card that I want to show off is actually Lady Maria, and in Bloodborne, Lady Maria is actually one of my favorite boss fights. It's super challenging, and since Bloodborne was my first Souls-like game, my experience with her was like slamming my head against a wall over and over again until I finally broke the wall. So my translation of Maria into Magic is this card right here, the Cursed Lady Maria. She is white for a 2/2 legendary creature, Human Nightmare. She has First Strike, Vigilance, and Lifelink. At the beginning of your end step, if the difference between your life total and target opponent's life total is 15 or greater, transform Lady Maria. She transforms into Maria, Keeper of the Nightmare, which is a 3/3 legendary creature, Human Nightmare, with double strike, vigilance, and whenever Maria attacks for the first time each turn, you may pay 6 life. If you do, untap all creatures you control. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. The idea here is that it's kind of representing her going into her second phase of the boss fight. The idea of the way that she flips is because as she gets lower on life, or as the difference between your life and her life expands, she gets more desperate and transforms into a mode where she no longer has lifelink and now has to pay life to constantly give you more power. The second transform card I want to show you is Father Gascoigne, who is one of the first bosses you can fight in Bloodborne, and he kind of represents the hunters turning into beasts, right? He's the first person you see like this, and this is the example you get very early on, kind of showing you that process. So in Magic, Father Gascoigne is 3 and a green for a 3/3 legendary creature, Human Hunter. When he enters, create a 1/1 white human creature token. Whenever another creature dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Gascoigne, and then if there are 3 or more +1/+1 counters on Gascoigne, transform him. And he transforms into Bloodlust Beast Gascoigne, who is a 4/4 legendary creature, Human Beast, with Trample, and he says, whenever this creature transforms into Bloodlust Beast Gascoigne, it fights target creature you don't control. Whenever another creature dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Gascoigne. The idea is just to represent he is killing beasts, and the more he kills beasts, the deeper he gets into the blood, and the more he starts to transform, and after 3 things have died, he now transforms fully into that beast. And the 1/1 human he creates actually represents one of his family members. You could see it as his wife, or you could see it as one of his daughters. The next transform card I want to show you is Scourge Beast. Hey, wait, spoilers. Actually, you can't look at that yet. It mentions a new mechanic, and so we're going to save that for later, but I think you get the idea. Transform is pretty self-explanatory. The next returning mechanic is Blood Tokens, another Innistrad banger. Now, the set that Blood Tokens come from isn't the best draft set I've ever played, but the Blood mechanic was a fantastic one. And if you know anything about Bloodborne lore, not only is blood a massive part, obviously, because it's in the name, but actually partaking in blood, blood healing, blood communion, and a lot of other conspicuous blood-related forms of consumption is a regular occurrence for a majority of the game's cast. blood tokens are a perfect fit for the set. Now, for anyone who doesn't know what blood tokens are, these are artifact tokens that can be created by effects of your cards. They have the ability that allows you to pay 1 mana, tap them, discard a card, and then sacrifice the artifact to draw a card. This mechanic allows you to get rid of cards you don't want in your hand for new ones that might be better. It supports artifact strategies, graveyard strategies, and many other commonly used draft archetypes. It is what we call a workhorse mechanic. It pulls its weight, needless to say. And in the Bloodborne set, it is doing even more than it did in the original iteration, as exemplified by the next returning mechanic. But before we get to that, in the Bloodborne set, blood appears primarily in black and red cards, but also in a couple of white cards. Let's see some examples of the cards that can make blood tokens in this set. The first card with blood tokens that I want to talk about is Blood Minister. And in the games, this is part of the very opening cutscene where you wake up in sort of a clinic and there is a dude who administers the healing blood to you to kind of rejuvenate you after your long journey. In Magic, he is 1 and a black for a 1/3 creature human cleric, and when this creature enters, create a blood token. He has tap, sacrifice another creature or artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Then there is the Bleeding Huntsman. These are just representing various types of huntsmen that you will fight. They're kind of the basic enemies that you're going to run into in the game, and this one is 1 in red for a 2/1 creature human beast hunter. Notice that they are both beasts and hunters. This represents their transformation. They haven't fully done that yet, but they're still kind of in the middle of doing that. And whenever this creature enters or dies, you create a blood token. And the last blood token card I want to show you is the Bloodletting Beast, and in this one, this represents a boss that you can see in a couple of places, in a couple of different forms. But the main place is going to be in the Chalice dungeons. He is a recurring boss that you'll fight down there, and in Magic he is 4 black-red for a 5/5 creature beast horror menace. Whenever this creature enters or attacks, create a blood token. You sacrifice 5 artifacts and or other creatures to transform him, and he transforms into Parasite Beast. And this is the part when he hits his next phase in the boss fight, his head explodes and a big parasite comes out. And so that is going to be a 7/5 creature beast insect horror with menace. And at the beginning of your end step, create X blood tokens, where X is the amount of life your opponents lost this turn. So what was the mechanic that I alluded to before that goes well with blood tokens? Well, if you guessed that it was our third and final mechanic that appeared previously in an Innistrad set, you'd be right. Good job. And if you guessed that it was Madness, then lucky guess. While both blood tokens and Madness have appeared in Innistrad previously, they've never actually appeared together in a set, in the same draft environment. Madness appeared in Eldritch Moon, and blood tokens originally appeared in Crimson Vow. These two mechanics go so well together, it felt like I had to put them in here. And not only that, but Madness is a huge theme in Bloodborne. The Nightmare, Mensis, communicating with Great Ones, it's all madness. When I started designing the set, I put Blood and Madness together in it, and it just seems so perfect. Sorry for getting ahead of myself, but for anyone who doesn't know what Madness does, it's a mechanic that allows you to cast a card for an alternate cost when you discard it. If you discard a card that has Madness, you first exile it, then you may choose whether or not you want to cast it for its Madness cost, then if you don't, you put it into your graveyard. One of the unique things about Madness is that it allows you to break normal casting restrictions. For example, if you have a creature, you normally can only cast that during your main phase at sorcery speed. But if you use a blood token to discard a creature with Madness on your opponent's turn, you can essentially cast them as though they had Flash with Madness. And in the Bloodborne set, this is a big part of how Blood and Madness interact. The mechanic appears in red and black and blue cards. So let's see how this looks in the set. For Madness, one of the first cards I want to show you is Arcane Patient. And now these are going to be the patients that you see in Yevsefka's clinic when you get deeper in and seeing the experiments that she's doing. Some of them are giant, some of them have special abilities, some of them are just heads. And this is one of the ones that has, the ability to use magic. So in Magic, Arcane Patient is 3 and a blue for a 3/2 enchantment creature humankin. When this creature enters, return target creature you don't control to its owner's hand, and it has Madness for 2 and a blue. So if you discard it, you can pay 2 and a blue to cast it. Now, it's an enchantment because all things that are more connected to the Great Ones become enchantments in the set, or are represented by enchantments in the set. And the patients are having experiments done on them that get them closer to communicating with the Great Ones. Next card is Blood Mad Blitz, and this, as you can see in the art, is just a moment in time when you as a player would be fighting the Bloody Crow of Canehurst, who has to use blood to empower his blade. The card costs red for an instant that gives target creature +2/+2 until end of turn. It also creates a blood token, and then it has madness for red. Now, you might be wondering, why is the madness cost and the regular cost the same exact thing here? And something I want to point out is madness is essentially getting you value because you get to use the card when you discard it instead of it just going to the graveyard. This card is also a little bit sneaky powerful because it creates a blood token which then fuels your other madness cards. It's both a madness card itself and also an enabler for those future madness cards. And then there's Winter Lanterns. The Winter Lanterns are super creepy. They kind of sing a little song and they're trying to draw you in. If you are within range of them in the game, they will give you Frenzy, which can end up killing you slowly over time. In Magic, they are 3 blue-red for a 1/1 creature nightmare. When this creature enters, gain control of target creature and opponent controls until end of turn, untap that creature, it gains haste until end of turn, and it has madness for 3 in a blue-red hybrid. When it enters, you're going to threaten something, and a couple of nice things about this is, one, you could blink it. There are abilities that allow you to, exile it and return it to the battlefield and then do its ability again, but also the fact that you can discard this and use it immediately, including at instant speed, right? Let me give you an example. You're on your opponent's turn, you have a blood token, you can crack your blood token, discard Winter Lantern, draw your new card, and cast your Winter Lantern in the middle of your opponent's combat, steal their creature, and block with their creature to do a trade. There are also a couple of common mechanics that appear in this set. The kind that don't appear in every Magic set, but appear often enough to no longer be considered quote-unquote set mechanics, like the following. Most Magic sets will have a couple of these kinds of mechanics, and so I just want to show off some of the ways that I'm using them. For example, I said that there were blink cards, but the first one of these is a card called Into the Mist. And Into the Mist is 1 in a blue for an instant that says exile target artifact or creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control, and it has flashback for 3 in a blue. So the ability that's returns in a lot of sets is flashback here, and this can be used on not only your creatures like Winter Lantern, who have cool enters effects, but it can also be used on artifacts that have cool enters or leaves effects, which we will see some of those in the future. So think about this card when we talk about some of the future cards. There's also Exhaust, is a really great mechanic that returns every so often, and I thought I'd use it in a couple places in my set as well. So the example here is Rifle Gravedigger, which is going to be one of the Gravediggers that you see in the Chalice Dungeons. These are the people who helped build the Chalice Dungeons in general, and in Magic it's represented with creature that's 1 black for a 3/3 creature Tumerian, and it has, when this creature enters or dies, mill 3 cards, so it fills up your graveyard, and then Exhaust for 2 and a black. Target creature and opponent controls gets -3/-3 until end of turn, activate only as a sorcery. And remember, Exhaust abilities can only ever be used once per game, as long as this dude is still in play as the same object, which does mean if you use it with Into the Mist from before, it will reset that Exhaust and you can use the ability again. The idea is that, this is his one shot he has with his rifle, and then he has to attack you normally. And then there is the Giant Lost Child. Yeah, this is what they're called, actually. In the game, these things are called Giant Lost Child. So it's a little bit sad when you think about it that they're children. Lore-wise, I actually think that these are supposed to be attempted children of great ones that, were rejected or failed by their parents. So I think that might be why they're called that. Anyway, in Magic, it is 5 and a red for a 3/3 creature giant. When this creature enters, you may discard a card. If you do, it deals 6 damage to target creature you don't control. If a creature would die this way, exile it instead. So it's got a nice ability to help you, with your madness cards, or if you're just trying to fill your graveyard, and it has removal attached to it. The returning mechanic that's on this card is basic land cycling for 2. This means that you can pay 2, discard this card from your hand, and get any basic land from your library into your hand. For the last returning mechanic, it is actually somewhere in between a returning mechanic and a new one. So the mechanic is dungeons, but as my fellow Bloodborne lovers may have inferred, not just any dungeons. No, we aren't bringing back the dungeons from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. Instead, we are making a new one. Yes, that's right, the Bloodborne set has the Chalice Dungeon in it. In the video game, the Chalice Dungeons are an underground labyrinth that is procedurally generated with enemies, bosses, and treasure. In the lore, this is where the ancient civilization of the Tumerians lies. It's where they find the Great One Ebrietas. It's where the Healing Church begins their blood research. There's also other older civilizations and their ruins down there too. It's an infinite tomb of decaying history. So in Magic, for anyone who isn't familiar with dungeon mechanic, Dungeons were a mechanic introduced in the Dungeons & Dragons set, where when a card told you to venture into the dungeon, you would choose one of 3 dungeons to begin venturing into. You would start in the first room and trigger its ability shown. Then each subsequent time you ventured into the dungeon, you could move into the next room. If there were more than one room you could move into, you would choose which one you want to go into. You do this until you reach the end of the dungeon, and then you exit it. Then after that, you would be considered as having completed that dungeon, and then you could enter a new one once a card told you to venture again. In the Bloodborne set, there's only one dungeon card, and that is the Chalice Dungeon. And this is where the mechanics start to get a little bit complicated. Similar to the original dungeons, you begin when the card tells you to venture, however, you can only enter this dungeon if a card specifically tells you to venture into the Chalice Dungeon. This is how it appears on every dungeon card in the set, so you won't be bringing in the old AFR dungeons for this draft set. Let's take a look at the Chalice Dungeon card itself. Whew, what is going on in here? There are a lot of elements, so let's break them down, shall we? Let's start at the top, where this dungeon has its own special passive ability. We see it says, Hunt for Pale Blood. At the beginning of your end step, if a player gained life and a player lost life this turn, advance to the next room. Now, this is an ability word that appears on other cards in the set. We will dig into it a little bit more later, but for now, this is important because it means that the Chalice Dungeon can be progressed without needing a bunch of other cards to trigger it multiple times. As long as at the beginning of your end step, any player lost life and any player gained life this turn. Let's start looking at these rooms. The first one is suspicious. It says Chamber of the Seal. You gain X life, where X is 1 plus your insight. What's insight, you ask? Well, you'll just have to be patient and wait to find out, huh? If we can continue on, we will notice 2 rooms that split off from this room, except one of them has a lock on it. What's going on there? Well, again, please be patient. I'm going to explain it. If you want to be able to go through the lock, you're going to need a key. So for now, if we progress, we're going to have to go into the Tumerian Labyrinth, where it's going to let us either create a blood token or a cold blood token. What's a cold blood token? You ask way too many questions. This is another mystery that we're going to have to get into later. From here, we only have one direction we can actually go, so when we next venture, let's push it into the Is Gravestone, where we're going to get a 2/2 blue Fishkin enchantment creature token. After that, we go into Ailing Loran, which will give us a 3/3 green beast token. The last 3 rooms have given us tokens. I wonder if that's going to be relevant later on. Now, once we're in the Ailing Loran room, we hit another strange situation. Below us are 3 rooms that all have locks on them. So how are we supposed to get through these? Well, if we look just a little bit higher to the right, we'll notice that above the Ailing Loran room, there is a different symbol. Instead of a down arrow like the path we took before, it's an arrow that goes both ways. This means that you can actually go up in the dungeon rather than just going down like we normally do. So if we progress without a key from the Ailing Loran room, we can go up into the lever room, and that's where we'll receive the key that we've been needing. If you read this room, you'll notice it says, use this key to advance into a locked room. You cannot return to this room without using the key. If we were to progress from the lever room, we actually have 2 options. You'll remember that the arrow below goes both ways, allowing us to return to the Ailing Loran room. If we do that the next time we venture, we will get another 3/3 beast, and now the 3 locked rooms will be available to us. We can use a final venture to choose one of these ultimate options. Once we choose one, we have completed the dungeon and we must restart from the top without our key when we venture again. However, if instead of going downward from the lever room we chose to go up, we would actually get a 4/4 lifelink, but not just that, if we venture again after Tumerian Ihil, we will actually end up back at the beginning in the Chamber of the Seal. This will allow us to run the entire dungeon again if we wanted to. However, it is important to know that once you use a key, it is gone. So if you move from Tumerian Ihil into the Chamber of the Seal, you will no longer have your key and will need to go get it again. You might be wondering, why would I want to loop this infinitely instead of going into one of the 3 bottom options? Well, what if my deck doesn't have very many cards that venture into the dungeon, but I'm able to trigger Hunt for Pale Blood at the top very easily? See, once you complete the dungeon, the Hunt for Pale Blood ability that's on the dungeon is no longer active. Plus, a 4/4 lifelink is a pretty good threat that can help you trigger that ability more often. There are a ton of options for how you use this dungeon. The Chalice Dungeon is probably the most complicated part of this set, and probably the riskiest idea in the set. There are other big ideas that are very fun and creative, but this is the one that could risk confusing players more than the other ones, I think. But, I mean, how was I going to represent the Chalice Dungeons in Bloodborne and not make them an actual Magic the Gathering dungeon? Anyway, cards that venture into the Chalice Dungeon appear primarily on black cards, white cards, and a couple of red cards. Though, there are cycles of artifacts in all 5 colors that allow you to venture into the dungeon, so everyone will get a chance to do it. Now that we have an idea of how the dungeon works, let's look at a couple of cards that venture into it. So, looking at some of the cards that allow us to delve into the Chalice Dungeon, we can sort of see what kinds of decks we're going to want to build. So starting with Tomb Prospector, which is, there's a whole guild of these guys who went down into the Chalice Dungeons looking for treasure or remnants of the old civilizations, blood, power, that sort of thing. So in Magic, it is 4 and a black for a 5/4 creature human hunter that says, whenever this creature attacks, venture into the Chalice Dungeon. So every time it attacks, you delve deeper. It's him digging his way into the depths of the dungeon. And then he also has sacrifice another creature or artifact. This creature gains indestructible until on a turn, tap it. This is an ability that you'll see on some other cards in Magic where you pay a cost and then they get indestructible until on a turn, but you have to tap them. The idea here is that if an opponent uses removal on this card, if they do it before combat, it's going to stop you from being allowed to attack with it. Sort of a balancing effect of being able to give this card indestructible. But you can also activate that ability after you attack with it when someone blocks. Fits great with decks that want to sacrifice artifacts and creatures. There's a bunch of reasons you might want to do something like that in this set, but also the Chalice Dungeon creates so much material that you can sacrifice the material the Chalice Dungeon makes to keep this guy around. That's why this guy actually costs so much mana and why his stats aren't like the best in the world, is because it's actually a pretty powerful combination of abilities. The next card I want to point out is the Tumerian Descendant. Another thing you're going to find in the Chalice Dungeons are these Tumerians, right? Which is this ancient race of like almost vampire-like immortals who have been down here for millennia and who knows how long after their civilization fell and got buried into this tomb. In Magic, this guy is 2 white for a 4/4 creature, Tumerian Noble. He has Vigilance, and whenever a creature you control attacks, create a blood token. That's any creature, by the way, so you could be making a lot of blood tokens with this guy. He also has 2 sacrifice 2 artifacts and or enchantments, venture into the dungeon, so he can help you venture more into the dungeon by sacrificing that blood, getting you deeper, giving you more value, more power out of it. He also is able to sacrifice enchantments, and there are some enchantments that might be useful to be able to sacrifice, including enchantment creatures. The last Chalice Dungeon card I want to point out is Keeper of the Old Laurels, which is 2 and a red for a 3/2 creature, Tumerian Shaman. It says, whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, venture into the Chalice Dungeon. That means flashback, that means abilities that let you cast from your graveyard, and that also, very importantly, means madness, because technically, madness is being cast from exile. When you discard a madness card, it goes into exile first. Then you decide if you're going to cast it. If you don't, it goes to the graveyard. If you do, you cast it and it goes on the stack. So, Keeper of the Old Lords triggers off of Madness and lets you venture into the dungeon every time you cast a Madness spell. He also has sacrifice an artifact or creature. This creature gets +2/+0 until on a turn. So similar to the Tumerian Descendant, you're able to get power out of the things that you make from the Chalice Dungeon and be able to sacrifice things to get value. Hunt for Pale Blood. Now, see, this set has a couple of ability words. We've already seen one of them. And for anyone who's not sure what this means, you see, an ability word is an ability that repeats on multiple cards but isn't shortened into a keyword. This can be described as abilities that all trigger under the same condition but have a different output. For example, Landfall is a very common ability word that you will see in Magic. So, as we saw in the Chalice Dungeon, our first ability word is actually Hunt for Pale Blood. This is an ability that triggers so long as a player has gained life and a player has lost life this turn. All Hunt for Pale Blood abilities will actually trigger on your end step like we see in the dungeon. So, what does Hunt for Pale Blood even mean? Well, in Bloodborne, this mysterious pale blood is the whole reason your character has come to Yharnam, and interestingly enough, the story never outright explains what it is. There are enemies who bleed a white-gray blood that you might think is pale blood, and in some items the moon presence is actually referred to as pale blood. And also, after you defeat Rom in the story, you'll get a phrase that says, "Behold, a pale blood sky." What does all this mean? I honestly don't know, and I don't think there's supposed to be a correct answer to this question. There are a lot of theories, but the fact that it isn't 100% clear is part of what makes the mysteries of Bloodborne so compelling for me. Anyway, so many people have come to Yharnam to hunt the pale blood, but end up getting caught up in the hunt and becoming beasts themselves. That hunt is represented in the set by this mechanic. It appears mostly on green and black cards and also in the Chalice Dungeon. So let's look at some examples of cards so we can see how this works. The first Hunt for Pale Blood card is going to be the Beast Cutter Hunter. This is just a hunter who has the Beast Cutter weapon. He's 3 and a green for a 3/3 creature, human hunter. When this creature enters, target creature gets +2/+2 until on a turn. You can target itself, but it won't really do anything. The idea is that you have another creature in play, you're going to pump that, it gets to attack for good damage. But he also says, Hunt for Pale Blood, which means at the beginning of your end step, if a player gained life and a player lost life this turn, that's any player, could be you, could your opponent on both ends, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Pretty simple, but he does grow pretty easily. And the idea with this card is you'll find a way to gain some life, or your opponent maybe gains some life, and he's going to help you attack through by pumping something up, making your opponent less likely to block it because then they'll just lose their creature from that attack. He is really good if you're able to pair him with a lifelink creature from white or black. Next card is going to be Huntsman's Minion, and these are those big ogre-looking dudes that carry bricks or something else in the early game area. When I first started playing, these guys were terrifying to me. They were so fast and strong. I was not experienced with this kind of game yet, so I was always trying to avoid them. But in Magic, it's going to be 4 and a green for a 5/5 creature ogre hunter, because they are still hunters. They're paired up with the Huntsman. They have Trample, and they say, Hunt for Pale Blood. At the beginning of your end step, if a player gained life and a player lost life this turn, create a token that is a copy of a token you control, which is pretty much like Populate, although this is one of the only cards it appears on in the set. This can be good if you do Chalice Dungeon stuff, right? Because the Chalice Dungeon has Hunt for Pale Blood, so you're already wanting to do this kind of thing, and it creates a lot of great tokens for you. If you have other token makers, which are in green and white in this set, it's going to be very easy for this card to get a lot of value. He's also great at helping you get the life loss part of the trigger by having Trample, right? Because even if they block with like a 1/1 or a 3/3, you're still going to be dealing damage to the opponent, so that'll trigger the life loss portion. You just need to find a way to gain some life. And then we've got the Good Hunter. This is you, the player character, right? We had to have the player character in this set. And the Good Hunter is 2 and a green for a 3/3 legendary creature, human hunter. It says prevent all damage that will be dealt to hunters you control while fighting. This is a really fun idea that we came up with. Partially, this was someone from the community, Gesteigpanzer, who was helping us with some of our Bloodborne ideas, and they came up with this really cool idea where this guy doesn't take damage while he's fighting. And I decided to make it sort of work with all the hunters, so if you get fight cards, as we'll see later, this goes really well with them. But he also has Hunt for Pale Blood, and at the beginning of your end step, if a player gained life and a player lost life this turn, target creature you control fights target creature you don't control, playing into the hunting ability. He is going to keep hunting and get stronger about it, and he's not going to take damage when he gets to fight. You notice how the Huntsman's Minion cares about copying tokens, right? Well, as I alluded to when I spoke about the Chalice Dungeon, tokens are also a theme in this set. Cards that care about them, and of course, a ton of cards that make them. The Chalice Dungeon alone is capable of producing 5 different kinds of tokens, and that's not even all the different kinds of tokens in this set. So given all that, there is another ability word in the set to pay players off for making a bunch of tokens. It's called Otherworldly. This mechanic is meant to represent the connection to the Great Ones that so many elements of this world have. The fish people, the blood, the beasts, and all other tokens in the set exist as a direct result of the Great Ones meddling in the world of Bloodborne. So what is Otherworldly? Well, just like the last one, it's an ability word that functions like landfall. It says, whenever a token enters under your control, do X. The more tokens you can make, the better. This mechanic primarily shows up in blue, green, and white. So let's look at some example cards. So with Otherworldly, there were a couple of ways that I took them, but let's start with the Stalking Beastman here. This is a beastman that you'll see later on that is one of the huntsmen turned even more into a beast, so when they're further along in that process. And so this card is 1 and a green for a 2/1 creature, human beast hunter. It has Otherworldly, which is whenever a token enters under your control, similar to Landfall, but tokens instead of lands, and all the triggers will look like this if they say Otherworldly. Mill a card, then you may put a land card from your graveyard into your hand. Just a nice sort of value engine. He'll help you fill your graveyard a little bit and get those lands. If you mill a land this way, or you just already have some lands in your graveyard, you can keep getting them back for value. The next card is Healing Church Communion. This is a process that the Healing Church does to commune with the blood and to connect people together and use the healing blood to heal wounds. And the card is 1 and a green-white hybrid for an enchantment that says, when this enchantment enters, create a 1/1 human creature token, then attach target equipment you control to it. This is a line of text you actually might see on a lot of other cards that really helps that equipment deck sing, allowing you to get around equipment costs. This card also has otherworldly. Whenever a token enters under your control, surveil 1. So by itself, it's not very strong. It's make a 1/1 surveil 1, but what it's going to be doing is, obviously if you have some equipment, it's stronger, but it's also just going to be allowing you to churn through your deck, find what you need when you're playing a lot of tokens. And then we have our Labyrinth Spirit, which is kind of these ghosts that you'll see in the Chalice dungeons that attack you. They kind of disappear and reappear. They're in a lot of different places. In Magic, it's 2 and a white for a 3/1 creature spirit. When this creature enters, venture into the Chalice Dungeon, because it's a Chalice Dungeon creature, so it's gotta have that ability, but it also says otherworldly. Whenever a token enters under your control, tap target creature an opponent controls. What's really interesting about this is that when you venture into the Chalice Dungeon through an ability like this enters ability, it's usually creating a token at some stage along the way, which means it's going to trigger all of your otherworldly abilities like this one. While we're at it, I might as well talk about another mysterious element spoiled in the Chalice Dungeon. What the heck are these cold blood tokens anyway? Why are there 2 tokens called blood? Well, I do agree that the fact that this is called cold blood and we already have blood tokens is a little bit awkward. I think it's pretty important to the original game. Cold blood is the coagulation of the old blood that is used to strengthen our character and pay for upgrades and level ups. They grant you additional quote-unquote experience points called blood echoes. I know everything is blood something in this game, but bear with me. So, in the set, cold blood tokens are artifact tokens that read, tap, sacrifice this artifact, add 2 colorless mana. This mana can't be spent to cast spells from your hand. This is kind of like if you took a treasure token and a power stone token and then kind of fuse them together. These are one-shot bits of mana, but you have to sacrifice the token. They also add 2 mana instead of 1, like a treasure. And similar to a power stone, this mana has restrictions on how you can spend it. But it's a pretty broad restriction. See, Power Stones can't be spent on casting non-artifact spells, but that doesn't mean you can only use the mana for casting artifacts. See, the wording they used means you can actually also use them to activate abilities. Cold Blood are kinda like that as well. They cannot be used to cast spells from your hand, but you can use them to cast spells from your graveyard, so Flashback, that works. You can use them to cast spells from exile, so Madness works. And you can use them to activate abilities. They're a pretty versatile little token, all things considered. Cold Blood tokens appear in green, white, and black the most, so let's take a look at some of the cards that make Cold Blood tokens and some of the cards that pay you off for having them. And it's good that we moved right into Cold Blood after Otherworldly, because these 2 things go really well together, and the first card I want to show you is one that uses both of these things, which is Guiding Moonlight, which is representing that ethos of Ludwig with his Holy Moonlight Greatsword. In Magic, Guiding Moonlight is 1 and a green for an enchantment that says when this enchantment enters, create a Cold Blood token. So you're immediately getting sort of that 2 mana token, but it's got restrictions on when you can use it. But also this card has Otherworldly, so whenever a token enters under your control, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. So immediately when you play this, you're getting that rebate of creating that artifact Cold Blood token that could generate some mana, or could be used in other ways to sacrifice 2 abilities and whatnot, and you're also immediately getting a +1/+1 counter on something else. This also goes really well with the previous Otherworldly cards that we saw, because you're going to get to put a bunch of counters on a bunch of things as you're creating more tokens. This card is very good with venturing into the dungeon, because of all the tokens that created from there, you're going to get a ton of +1/+1 counters. And the next card in this line is Kane's Servant, which is 1 and a white for a 2/2 creature human peasant with lifelink, and it says whenever an equipment enters under your control, create a Cold Blood token. These guys are found in Canehurst Castle, and they are these like short dudes who help maintain the grounds. And what this guy is good at doing, he's got a couple of things going on. He's a little bit better than you might think. One, if you're playing an equipments deck, Cold Blood are actually good at activating the equip abilities or the trick weapon abilities to attach equipment to your stuff, so they kind of pay you off and give you that mana to do that with. But also, he has lifelink, and lifelink creatures are great to equip too, because they get a better bonus out of stat buffing. Also, this guy's pretty decent at getting you that life gain trigger for your hunt for pale blood, right? If you attack with a lifelink creature and your opponent doesn't block it, they lose life and you gain life. That immediately resolves the condition for hunt for pale blood for all of your cards like that. And then we have the big bad beast himself, the blood-starved beast. This is the first brick wall a lot of players find themselves against when they played Bloodborne, where it took them a million tries to finally beat this boss. Magic is represented as 4 black for a 5/4 creature beast horror. When this creature enters, each other creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. Then, if a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, instead exile that card and create a cold blood token. So he's generating you extra cold blood that you can use when your opponent's creatures die, including with that enters trigger. So if you play this guy and his -2/-2 ability kills a couple of creatures, you're going to get a couple of cold blood tokens. And where you're going to use those cold blood tokens? Well, Bloodstarved Beast also has another ability. It says XX black. Exile this card from your graveyard, each opponent loses X life, and you gain X life. If mana produced by a cold blood was used to activate this ability, copy this ability. So what's happening here is, if you have 2 cold blood and 2 black mana, you sack both the cold bloods, and you pay black, that means X equals 2 there, right? Because you had to put 2 colorless in for each. But because you used a cold blood, it's going to double the effects of this ability, so it's essentially like it costed X black as long as you used cold blood. And in that scenario, it would be black, sack your 2 cold bloods, and your opponent loses 4 life, and you gain 4 life. Any Bloodborne lover could tell you, you couldn't have a set about Bloodborne if you didn't show off the incredibly unique weapons that show up in the game. These aren't just any old weapons, no. If that were the case, I wouldn't be talking about them in the new mechanics section, would I? See, Bloodborne has some very special weapons called trick weapons. These are weapons invented by hunters to make killing and subsequently dismembering beasts easier. Yes, you heard me correctly. I bet some of you Bloodborne fans didn't actually know that there was a lore reason for why trick weapons do what they do. You see, the problem with the beasts of Bloodborne is, well, they're filled with the healing blood. And that means that they regenerate from their injuries. They don't stay dead. So in order to keep beasts from regenerating, hunters have to make sure they completely dismember or otherwise completely incinerate the beasts that they hunt. And over time, the Hunter's Workshop put out a variety of tools that could be used in a variety of ways to achieve the goal of eviscerating, crushing, and annihilating the beasts to the point that they could no longer regenerate. One side of each weapon is good for the fight while they're still alive, and the other side is good for the cleanup to make sure they stay dead. Take the Saw Cleaver, for instance. The extended version is good for having reach in combat when you want to keep the beast away from you until you can incapacitate them. Then, the folded form turns it into a handsaw, good for literally digging in elbows deep in viscera and sawing the beast's limbs off. I think you get the idea. So, in the magic set, trick weapons are represented by transforming equipment. Instead of a normal equip ability, they have an ability labeled Trick Weapon, which allows you to pay mana to attach them to a creature, just like a normal equip ability, but the alternate ability is, if it is already equipped and you activate Trick Weapon, it transforms into its other form. These weapons can transform back and forth as many times as you want, and many of the cards in the set will pay you off for transforming your permanents. This mechanic shows up on equipment in all colors and in colorless, but red and white are the 2 colors that make the most use of it. So let's take a look at a couple of these and maybe a card that is meant to play really well with them. The classic. This was my starting weapon, the Hunter's Axe. This is the one that I started the majority of the early game with, and I loved it all the way until I got the Kirk Hammer. Early on in the game, you get like a choice between 3 weapons, the Hunter's Axe, the Saw Cleaver, and the Threaded Cane that turns into a whip. I always chose the Hunter's Axe. So in Magic, the Hunter's Axe is represented here with 3 colorless or 3 generic mana, for an artifact equipment that has equipped creature gets +3/+1 and has trample. And then it has Trick Weapon for 2 mana, which means if it's not attached to something, you can pay 2 to attach it to something to give those buffs to it. If it is attached when you pay it, you can either attach it to something else or you flip it into the other side. And the other side of Hunter's Axe is Extended Hunter's Axe, which is where it turns into like a polearm essentially, which is an artifact equipment. It says whenever this equipment transforms into Extended Hunter's Axe, untap equipped creature and put a +1/+1 counter on it, then you gain 3 life. Equipped creature gets +1/+1. It also has Trick Weapon 2 on the other side, so you can flip it back and forth if you want to. On one side you get a big power boost and trample, and the other side you gain a little bit of defense, you gain some life, and it puts counters on it. So flipping back and forth is going to generate value. This is also helpful for when you want to trigger Hunt for Pale Blood, because you gain 3 life on one side to have that condition, and then have Trample on the other side so that you can get through and make your opponent lose life to trigger your Hunt for Pale Blood. Then there's Ligarius's Wheel, a very iconic weapon from this game, which costs in Magic 1 red-white for an artifact equipment that has equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has Vigilance, Trample, and Haste. And also, its equip ability, Trick Weapon, only costs 1. So it only costs 1 mana to equip and 1 mana to flip into Vile Blood Killer. At the beginning of your end step, if equipped creature attacked this turn, it deals 2 damage to any target and you gain 2 life. If a creature would die this way, exile it instead. Is able to trigger your Hunt for Pale Blood pretty easily with that other side. Deals 2 damage maybe to your opponent's face, and then you gain 2 life, that's Hunt for Pale Blood. But it also could be that you kill a creature. And as we'll see later on, flavorfully, this can get rid of Annalise, which is the Vile Blood that Alfred kills. So whenever it deals that 2 damage, it exiles it. However, in the game there was actually another character who also had the Ligarius Wheel, but he was just in the Chalice dungeons mostly, and it was the Queen Killer. And in Magic, he costs 2 red-white for a 3/3 creature human hunter, and it says when this creature enters, search your library for an equipment card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. So he can go get your Ligarius' Wheel when he enters, so you're ready to put it on him. He also works really well with it because he says, whenever an equipment attached to a creature you control transforms, that creature gets +2/+2 and gains Trample and Haste until end of turn. What can happen here is you can equip the wheel to someone and then flip it, and it'll get this additional +2/+2. It'll maintain the Trample and Haste from the other side and be able to deal that extra damage. It's also good with any of your other equipment that are able to get this ability. Say, whenever equipment attached to a creature you control transforms, there's a bunch of equipment out there that cost very little to transform, and so he's going to be able to stack up these abilities. And what's cool about Ligarius's Wheel with Queen Killer is that because the trick weapon cost is only 1, for every 1 mana you pay, you could be giving the equipped creature +2/+2. It's a very powerful combo, but it's fitting because this is a guy who's literally holding the Ligarius's Wheel in the art. Alright, we saved another important mechanic until now. There is one last thing I hinted at in the Chalice Dungeon. Remember what it was? No, you can't go back and check, cheater! Yes, in the very first room of the Chalice Dungeon, it says, you gain X life, where X is 1 plus your insight. So, our next mechanic is insight. In Bloodborne, insight refers to your depth of inhuman knowledge. It increases as your character gains knowledge beyond the ken of men. Eyes on the inside of your brain, which allow you to see and know things that you really shouldn't know. As a mechanic in the video game, you get more insight as you fight more bosses and consume more wisdom of the Great Ones. The more insight you have, the more of the world around you changes. There will be a number at the top right of the screen showing your current insight. At 1 insight, the doll in the hunter's dream will come to life. Before that, she actually lies there inanimate. At 30 insight, you can hear winter lanterns singing in the distance with a different song than they sing when you're up close. At 40 insight, you can see amygdalas hanging from the Oedon Chapel in Cathedral Ward. And at 60 insight, you can hear a faint cry of a baby, wherever it is. Someone give it a bottle. There are a bunch of other minor mechanics tied to how much insight you have, like some enemies get stronger, others get new attacks, as well as some places where new enemies will spawn. In the Magic set, insight is a mechanic that appears on cards in the following manner. Cards will say, increase your insight. What this means is, you gain an insight, then surveil X and lose X life, where X is your current insight, then draw a card. So, you're getting to see deeper and deeper into your deck, the more insight you gain, but at the cost of losing more and more life each time you gain insight. This mechanic plays well into many of the graveyard synergies in the set, as well as giving you a nice way to meet half of the Hunt for Pale Blood abilities without needing to attack and deal damage to your opponent. It is a high-risk mechanic. While gaining a lot of insight can mean you draw a lot of cards and dig deep into your deck, the loss of life begins to add up as you delve into the forbidden knowledge of eldritch beings. This mechanic appears in all colors except white. Let's look at a couple of cards that gain you insight. I'd like to show you a couple of extra cards here as well that play a huge role with this mechanic in the set. Starting with What We Should Not Know. Now, this is just sort of a flavor card. It doesn't really represent a specific time in the game, but it costs 1 and a blue for an instant, says increase your insight, and it has flashback for 2 and a blue. This is sort of like a power crept Think Twice, but these days Think Twice just isn't really what it used to be. This card is a little bit better than that, but it also has the downside of you losing some life. It stacks up very quickly, so be careful, you can lose a lot of life. Think about the process of playing this card. It costs a total of 5 mana over the course of maybe 2 turns, so that's not too bad to do it that way. You could go turn 2 and 3 play this card. You get 2 cards, that's great. You surveil a total of 3, it's going to be surveil 1, then surveil 2, but you also lose a total of 3 life, and that is not insignificant. That is the big thing that I want you to take away from Insight is you're going to lose a lot of life, so be very careful. Make sure your deck has some of these life gain cards. This set has more life gain than your typical set does. Make sure you're pairing your Insight gain with at least a little bit of life gain. This isn't the only way that Insight is used. Most cards that gain you Insight are going to just say increase your Insight in some way, but sometimes there are cards that are going to use how much Insight you have, like End of Night. This is representing the ending where you choose to end a nightmare and wake up in the waking world, and you let Garamond kill you. In Magic, it's 2 black for a sorcery that says increase your Insight, so just do that one, tick it up, do your surveilling and losing life and drawing a card, and then it says each creature gets -X until on turn, where X is your Insight. Now, a lot of times this -X is not going to be huge. If you haven't played any other cards that gain Insight, this is just -1 after you gain your Insight. But a lot of times it'll be 2 or 3, which is pretty good when paired with still getting to draw a card. But again, do not forget, you are losing life. It is paying quite a big cost to increase your Insight. But another card that uses this ability pretty well is Persistence. And this is kind of representing the fact that your hunter keeps coming back. When they die, they come back. When they die, they keep coming back over and over again. They don't die. You're going to fight this boss, you're going to beat this boss, no matter how many times it takes. So, in Magic, it's 1 and a green for an instant, increase your Insight, and target creature gets +X until on a turn, where X is your Insight. Again, even if this ends up only being +1/+1, you still surveilled and drew a card. Surveil 1, draw a card, +1/+1 for 1 and a green is still pretty good, and as you get higher numbers, that bump becomes pretty relevant. I've said it multiple times, but I want to keep saying it. You still lose life. They have a lot of power coming with them, but there's this risk-reward situation where you could be putting yourself in danger. And in my experience, when I was playing with a lot of Insight cards, it felt good, it felt powerful, but it felt very dangerous. And I put myself in scenarios where I was at 9 life by turn 4, mostly by my own hand, so you really do got to be careful. Insight can be gained in a lot of ways. Many cards are one-shot with the way that they gain Insight, but some can do it multiple times, like Mensis Cage. Now, these are those hats, or those helmets essentially, that Mensis scholars use to try and help them channel into the nightmare instead of being in the waking world. And in Magic, it's represented by an equipment that costs 1 in a blue-red hybrid. It's an artifact equipment, and it has equipped creature gets +1/+1, and it has when this creature dies, increase your Insight. It also says whenever you discard a card, you may attach this equipment to target creature you control, and then it has equip for 1. So this can gain you quite a lot of Insight if you are able to either sacrifice the creature that it's attached to, or you're just using it in combat, blocking and attacking, and getting some of that payback from it. And when you're increasing your Insight, you're going to be drawing a lot of cards, and you might be using them as discard fodder. So this card can pay you off by letting you just attach your cage to anything you want to anytime you discard. A really cool combo with this is you attack with a creature that has this on it, and they block a different creature so you don't draw a card, but you have a blood token in play, so you crack the blood token, discard a card, and switch which creature this is attached to at instant speed so that you can draw the card off of the thing that they blocked rather than the thing they didn't block. And last one I want to show is just sort of the power that can come from Insight cards. Green-red actually is really good at using Insight powerfully, whereas blue is really good at gaining Insight quickly. So with this card, we've got our Beast-Possessed Soul, which is another Chalice Dungeon creature, but it's also a little bit different than the other beasts lore-wise. This doesn't seem to be a beast that was born out of the blood, where some human turns into a beast. This seems more like a demon or something that was summoned from another plane. And in Magic, it is 3 red-green for a 3/4 creature beast nightmare. When this creature enters, you may increase your Insight. Key thing there, you can choose not to if it's going to hurt you. It also says when this creature attacks, you may discard a card. If you do, this creature deals X damage to any target where X is your Insight. If this is your only Insight card, this effect is not very good, right? It's attacking and you have to discard a card to only get 1 damage. It's not super good. But as the game goes on, 2 damage, that's not too bad. 3 damage, that's really good. And 4 damage, I would love to discard a card to deal 4 damage to anything. There are a ton of cards in the set that increase your Insight and make use of your current Insight number, but there's a specific threshold that you're going to want to hit in order to unlock the power of a lot of cards in the set. That threshold is 3 Insight. Once you have 3 or more Insight, all of your cards with the Blood Moon ability will turn on. No, this doesn't turn non-basic lands into mountains. In the video game, the Blood Moon occurs after defeating Rom the Vacuous Spider. Your insight will be high at this point, and the entire world will warp and change around you. In the Magic set, this is represented by cards that either transform or have additional abilities as long as you have 3 or more insight, like the following cards. It's represented in cards like Black Sky Eye, which is a Hunter's Tools kind of spell ability that you're able to use in the game that kind of shoots someone with a little laser bolt. And in Magic, it costs red for an instant that deals 2 damage to any target, so a nice shock. But if you have Blood Moon, so 3 or more insight, it deals 4 damage instead of 2. Very simple templated ability, but very powerful. 1 mana for 4 damage is very, very strong. So hitting that threshold is going to unlock cards like this. Same thing is also true with more complicated cards like Cramped Casket, which these are these big zombie casket amalgamations of corpses that you see after the Blood Moon has risen in Yargul. And in Magic, I represented it with 4 black for a 5/5 creature zombie horror, and it has Blood Moon. As an additional cost to cast the spell, sacrifice an artifact or creature unless you have 3 or more insight. So it has a cost you have to pay, but you don't have to pay that cost if you have Blood Moon. Cramped Casket also has Death Touch, and it says, when this creature enters, each opponent sacrifices a creature, then each opponent sacrifices an artifact. So it gets rid of 2 things that your opponents have when it enters, as well as being a decently sized Death Touch creature. Don't underestimate bigger Death Touch creatures because they're very good at preventing double blocks. And yes, finally we can talk about the card I alluded to earlier in Scourge Beast. Now this is a pretty simple Blood Moon card, but it was one of the first ones I created, and I feel like it gives you a good essence of the power level that you should be getting out of Blood Moon. So it costs 2 red-green for a 4/4 Trample Haste. That's pretty good. That's going to hit him as a scary threat that you can put down just by itself. And then it says at the beginning of your end step, if you have 3 or more insight, transform it. And it becomes a 5/5 Trample, so it gets a little buff. And it says at the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Now, this ability will not trigger the first time it flips because it's flipping into this creature at your end step. It's not going to be able to trigger this ability as well, but then every single turn after that, it's getting a little bit bigger. Now I want to talk about my favorite mechanic from this set. It is also a pretty complicated mechanic here, but I believe that's thematic. This mechanic is called Commune. This refers to communicating with the Great Ones, like Kos. The Great Ones in Bloodborne are beings from beyond the mortal plane of existence. Think eldritch beings from the writings of H.P. Lovecraft. They are the reason everything is mutating, changing, and corrupting. There's a lot to know about the lore of the Great Ones, but to give you a short rundown, Great Ones exist on a different plane of existence, as I said, but they are able to influence the world of mortals. They do so in a myriad of ways. Some of them appear in physical manifestations, like Ebrietas, Flora, and Amygdalas. Others are incorporeal, like Oedon and Mergo. All of them can be communed with in various ways, but each of them differ in the process. In the set, this is represented by cards which say, commune with X. X will be one of the 5 Great Ones I've chosen to represent here. When you commune with a Great One, if you don't already control that Great One, you may create a token of that Great One. If you already control them, or don't want a token of them, you can instead awaken a Great One you already control. The Great Ones are legendary enchantment tokens that look like this. Similar to a vehicle, they are not actually creatures at first. They do have power and toughness, but aren't initially quote-unquote awakened. When you awaken one, it becomes a creature until your next turn, giving you 1 full turn cycle to either attack or block with them. All of the Great Ones have extremely powerful attack triggers that will happen whenever it or any of your other Great Ones attack. This means that they work really well together, because even if only one of your Great Ones is awake, its attack will trigger all of your other Great Ones too. So let's look at each one of these Great Ones individually, then let's look at some cards that can commune with them and awaken them. Ebrietas was found in the depths of the Chalice Dungeons and is the most amicable to the desires of mortals. She collaborates directly with the Healing Church and is the only Great One that mortals have spoken with directly and survived. In Magic, Ebrietas, Daughter of the Cosmos, is a 3/6 token legendary enchantment Great One. Note, it doesn't say creature there, so it's not a creature at first, like all of them. It says, Ebrietas is colorless. Whenever you awaken a Briotas, she becomes a creature in addition to her other types until your next turn. So that's what awakening is. They become a creature until your next turn, and you can choose to either attack on your turn or block on your turn. Very important thing to note is if, let's say, you commune twice in one turn, so you commune, put a Briotas into play, then commune again and awaken her, she does not have haste, so she's not going to be able to attack on the first turn that she comes in. So be aware of that. Kind of pace out your commune so you don't make that mistake. As for her ability, a Briotas says, whenever a Briotas or another Great One you control attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control and each non-creature Great One you control. If you've completed the Chalice dungeon, put 3 additional +1/+1 counters on each Great One you control. Oedon exists on a higher plane than any of the other Great Ones. If a Great One like Kos exists 1 layer above humans, then Oedon exists 1 layer above that. Even so, Oedon consorts with mortals, and many mortals worship Oedon and build temples in his honor. Oedon is also actually the only Great One explicitly mentioned to be male, as he attempts to father children with mortals like Ariana. Oedon is represented by this right here, Formless Oedon, which, as you can see, it just shows the Carol rune in the art, and this is because he's formless. There is no visual representation of Oedon. But in Magic, he is a 10/10 token legendary enchantment Great One. He is colorless. Whenever you awaken him, he becomes a creature until your next turn. He also has Blood Moon that says Oedon can't attack unless you have 3 or more insight. Now, he can block if you awaken him while you don't have 3 or more insight, but you're going to need 3 or more insight if you want to attack with this 10/10. Thankfully, his ability doesn't really require you to attack. He says whenever you awaken Oedon, you gain 3 life, then awaken each other Great One you control. So if you have a deck that can commune with a lot of the Great Ones, if not all of them, he is going to make it easier for you to awaken them all at once and have a huge alpha strike with all of them. What I think is interesting about his design is it reflects the fact that he's just a little bit more distant than the other Great Ones, but he's also more powerful and can have more sway over them. The manifestation of Kos was killed by the Bergenworth scholars in their desire to research the Great Ones in their blood. Them doing so cursed the fishing hamlet to become fishmen. The Hunter's Nightmare is a direct result of the sins of Bergenworth, trapping people like Maria and Ludwig there forever, despite their deaths in the waking world. Kos, Mother of the Nightmare, is a 0/8 token legendary enchantment Great One. Kos is colorless. Whenever you awaken Kos, she becomes a creature in addition to her other types until your next turn. And she says, whenever Kos or another Great One you control attacks, create 2/2/2 blue fish horror enchantment creature tokens that are tapped and attacking. This ability represents the fact that her existence and her death create the nightmare, or the Hunter's Nightmare, and also mutate and manipulate the fishing hamlet folk to turn them more fish-like, Innsmouth style. The Brain of Mensis is a Great One that has a lot of mystery surrounding its existence. Some believe that it was the collective minds of the School of Mensis that created this Great One. Others believe that it was the nightmare created by the school that pulled this Great One into it for them to find. Either way, the brain is a rotted collection of eyes and gray matter that is completely immobile, housed within the Nightmare of Mensis. The Brain of Mensis is a 4/1 token legendary enchantment Great One. It's colorless. Whenever you awaken it, it becomes a creature until your next turn. It also says whenever the brain or another Great One you control attacks, you may discard a card. If you do, that creature can't be blocked this turn, then increase your insight. So it's kind of like discarding then drawing, but you increase your insight instead, which can be good and bad. She also says, if you would lose life while gaining insight, you lose 2 less life instead. So your first 2 insight gains with this card out are going to cost you no life, and each one beyond that is still costing you a lot less life. This helps mitigate how much insight this card and cards that bring it out are wanting you to gain. Lastly, Flora, or the Moon Presence, is the Great One of the Hunter's Dream. Like most Great Ones, Flora's machinations are an enigma, but it is theorized that Flora facilitates the Hunter's Dream as a way to continue the hunt forever. She gives hunters a place to recuperate and strengthen themselves before waking into the hunt again. Flora, the Moon Presence, in Magic is a 5/5 token legendary enchantment Great One. It's colorless. Whenever you awaken it, it becomes a creature in addition to its other types until your next turn. It also says whenever Flora or another Great One you control attacks, up to one target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. When a creature dies this way, create a 3/3 green beast creature token. So this is to represent the fact that Flora is constantly pressuring and pushing hunters to go back to the hunt, to keep on hunting. And the more they do that, the more they turn into beasts. This ability can get you 2 beasts. If both creatures die in the fight, you get 2 beasts out of the deal. Last small thing I want to mention with the Great Ones and communing is that amygdalas are lesser Great Ones that appear everywhere in Bloodborne. They constantly follow around the more powerful Great Ones in an attempt to draw on their power. So in the set, they're represented like this. It's a common, and it doesn't have any special triggers itself, but don't underestimate this card. It is a Great One, so when it attacks, it will trigger your other Great Ones. I just wanted to point this out. There are a couple of other Great Ones that aren't tokens, like Orphan of Kos and Marigo's Wet Nurse, but those are both mythic rares, so Amygdala is actually very special in this set. Next, we have a secret returning mechanic in Carol Runes. Returning mechanic? What are you talking about, Johnny? There are no Carol Runes in MTG already. Right, yeah, that is true. But give me a moment and you'll understand what I mean. See, in Bloodborne, Carol Runes are symbols or markings made to represent the language of the Great Ones. When attempting to visualize the language of Great Ones, it imbues power into the world. Their thoughts and communication are so powerful and warping that just attempting to speak their language is impossible, and attempting to write it creates these runes full of reality warping energy. In the game, these runes are equipped to your character to give them strength. Each one represents a different concept, which gives you different abilities. These can affect your weapons, your blood vials, your attacks, and your stats. So, in MTG, I have represented them as auras. But not just any auras, you see? They are runes. Anyone remember the rune cycle from Kaldheim? God, I love these designs, but they're the only time I've ever seen this type of design used in Magic. They let you give a creature an ability like a normal aura. Or you could attach them to an equipment, and that equipment will give that same ability to any creature that's equipped with it. So I made an entire mechanic to represent what those do. Now, this isn't exactly a returning mechanic, you see. Carol Runes sort of encompass the effects that runes had from Kaldheim, but they add the ability to animate other permanents. See, let me show you. The Moon Rune here costs 1 mana, it's an aura enchantment, and it can enchant non-enchantment permanents. Now, depending on the permanent you enchant, the Carol Rune ability will do something different. So let's read what the ability says for Moon Rune. It says, this creature gets +2/+1 and has, whenever this creature attacks, discard a card, then draw a card. And in parentheses, it has the reminder text for Carol Rune to tell us where to apply this ability. Enchanted creature and a creature equipped with enchanted equipment gain these abilities. If enchanted permanent isn't a creature or equipment, it becomes a 0/0 creature. So what this means is, if you attach this to a creature, that creature gains those stats and abilities. If this is attached to an equipment, any creature equipped with that equipment gains those stats and abilities. However, if you attach this to, say, a land, that land becomes a 0/0 at base, but then it gains those stats and abilities. So, if you, say, attach this to, a blood token, right? That will make your blood token into a 2/1 creature with, when this attacks, you can rummage. One of the big issues with auras typically is how they leave you vulnerable to getting 2-for-1. Meaning, if an opponent uses a removal spell on the enchanted creature, you lose the creature and the aura. You lost 2 cards, they lost 1. A lot of better auras in Magic allow you to recoup this disadvantage, like the old Kaldheim runes drew you a card. The Carol runes do not do this. Instead, they have high flexibility. They can animate extra permanents that you no longer need, like extra lands or things like blood tokens. They also have an attack trigger that can allow you to recoup your investment in that way over time. I prefer this kind of design because it encourages building a game plan to make the best use of your cards, rather than just recouping the investment for free. Now, you might be wondering why it says enchant non-enchantment permanent, and that's for a few gameplay reasons. First, we don't want you animating other runes with your runes. That would be very confusing, and I'm not sure you can have a creature be an aura at the same time as it's able to attack and block. Secondly, Great Ones, the tokens we saw earlier, are enchantments. If you could use these to awaken your Great Ones permanently, it would be far too broken, as Great Ones have extremely powerful attack triggers that you're meant to work hard to be able to trigger. Anything that could permanently awaken them is probably a problem for this set. Now, this does cause one slight problem, in that there are a decent number of enchantment creatures in this set, like the Fishman and the Patience. but I think this is a necessary loss to maintain the gameplay of this mechanic. You can always enchant a land, if nothing else. Okay, so that's all of the new and returning and secret returning mechanics that we needed to go over. Now I want to talk about some themes in the set, because while the mechanics are cool and they span a lot of different colors, it is important to know where the themes of the set lie so that when you play with it or when you draft it, you kind of know where you can start. Think of these as the base 2-color archetypes. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the 2-color archetypes are not the only directions you can go, and most of them bleed into the other colors. But hopefully this will give you an idea of the kinds of cards you're going to see in the set, so that you know what you can play. Seeing these patterns will allow you to build better and stronger decks that fully utilize the tools at your disposal. So let's go over the 10 2-color pairs quickly, and allow me to show you what I mean. Blue-white is an artifact control deck. Some of the cards that represent it are Holy Moonlight Sword, which is 2 white-blue for a legendary artifact equipment that says, when Holy Moonlight Sword enters, and whenever equipped creature attacks, you may exile another target creature or artifact until Holy Moonlight Sword leaves the battlefield. And since it's equipment, it also has equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has Vigilance and Ward 2, and its equip cost is 4. There's also Gentle Quiet, which is white-blue for an instant that says counter target spell unless its controller pays 3 plus an additional X. You gain X life, where X is the number of artifacts you control. One of blue-white's strongest cards is Ludwig the Accursed, which is 3 white-blue for a 4/4 legendary creature beast horror with lifelink and trample. It says whenever you gain life, create that many blood tokens. This ability triggers only once each turn. Whenever Ludwig deals combat damage to a player, if an equipment is attached to him, you may transform him. His other side is Ludwig the Holy Blade, which is a 6/6 legendary creature Night Horror with lifelink and trample, and it says whenever Ludwig attacks, you may sacrifice another creature or artifact. If you do, exile target creature you don't control. The last blue-white card that represents it very well is the Sin of Bergenworth, which is 1 white-blue for an enchantment that says tap an untapped artifact you control, add blue or white. It also has an exhaust ability that says pay 9 generic mana, create a 1/1 white human creature token for each artifact you control. White-black is a deck built around sacrificing non-land permanents. Its first card is Alfred, Hunter of Vilebloods, which is white-black for a 2/2 legendary creature human cleric with lifelink that says whenever another creature dies, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. White-black also has Impurity Oath, which is a Carol rune. It costs 2 white-black for an enchantment or a rune with enchant non-enchantment permanent. It has the Carol rune ability, which says this creature gets +4/+4 and has whenever this creature attacks, you may sacrifice a non-land permanent. If you do, each opponent loses 3 life. And as a reminder for what Carol rune does, it says enchant creature and a creature equipped with enchanted permanent gain these abilities. If enchanted permanent isn't a creature or equipment, it also becomes a 0/0 creature. Black-white also has Martyr Ligarius, which is 6 white-black for a 6/6 legendary creature Spirit Noble with affinity for tokens, meaning this spell costs 1 less to cast for each token you control. He also says whenever a token you control leaves the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life, and at the beginning of your end step, create a token copy of each differently named token you control. Lastly, Black-white has Nightmare Cannoneer, which is 4 white-black for a 4/5 creature warrior horror. It says whenever this creature enters or attacks, you may sacrifice another non-land permanent. If you do, destroy target non-land permanent you don't control. Red-white is a deck built around equipment, specifically trick weapons, and cheating those costs on those equipment. Their first card is Labyrinth Flaming Swordsman, which is 1 and 2 red-white hybrids for a 3/2 creature Temerian Soldier that says whenever this creature attacks, you may attach target equipment you control to target creature you control, then you may transform that equipment. Red-white also has Eileen the Crow, which is red-white for a 2/2 legendary creature Human Hunter with first strike and haste, and whenever Eileen deals combat damage to a player or hunter, put a +1/+1 counter on her. And whenever a permanent you control transforms, draw a card. Lastly, red-white has the Queen Killer, which is 2 red-white for a 3/3 creature human hunter, with when this creature enters, search your library for an equipment card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Whenever equipment attached to a creature you control transforms, that creature gets +2/+2 and gains trample and haste until end of turn. The green-white deck is built around tokens, making lots of tokens, going wide, and getting value from those tokens. Their first card is Healing Church Communion, which is 1 in a green-white hybrid for an enchantment that reads, when this enchantment enters, create a 1/1 white human creature token, then attach target equipment you control to it. It also has Otherworldly, Whenever a token enters under your control, surveil 1. Green-white also has Crimes of the Church, which is 2 green-white for an enchantment that says if you would create 1 or more tokens, you may create that many 3/3 green beast creature tokens instead. Also, green-white has the Tragedy of Ludwig, which is X green-white for an instant that says create X 1/1 white human creature tokens. For each token created this way, you may attach an equipment you control to it. Blue-black is one of 3 madness decks in this set. Blue-black is centered around getting value from your madness cards. It has Carrion Crow, which is 1 in a blue-black hybrid for a 2/2 creature bird horror. This creature gets +1/+1 as long as you've discarded a card this turn, and has madness for blue-black. And as a reminder, that means if you discard this card, discard it into exile. When you do, you can cast it for its madness cost or put it in your graveyard. Blue-black also has Mad One, which is 2 in a blue-black hybrid for a 3/1 creature spirit that says when this creature enters, if you've discarded a card this turn, you draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. It also has Madness for 3 in a blue-black hybrid. Lastly, blue-black has Surrounded by Mad Ones, which is 4 blue-black for an instant that says each player discards 4 cards, exile each card with Madness discarded this way. For as long as they remain exiled, you may cast those cards for their Madness costs. And this card also has Madness for 2 blue-black. Red-blue is another Madness deck, but this one is more focused on how well it can discard cards to make Madness easier. It has Mensis Cage, which is 1 in a blue-red hybrid. It's an artifact equipment that says equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has when this creature dies, increase your insight. And as a reminder, insight is when you gain it, you surveil X and lose X life, where X is your current insight, then you draw a card. This equipment also says when you discard a card, you may attach this equipment to target creature you control. And it also has Equip 1. Blue-red also has Frenzying Voices, which is 1 in a blue-red hybrid for an instant that says you may discard a card or sacrifice an artifact. If you do, draw 2 cards. Additionally, blue-red has the Winter Lantern, which is 3 blue-red for a 1/1 creature nightmare. It says when this creature enters, gain control of target creature an opponent controls until end of turn. Untap that creature, it gains haste until end of turn. This creature also has Madness for 3 in a blue-red hybrid. Our last Madness deck is the red-black deck, which is centered around blood tokens and using those to achieve their madness. They have Mutated Crow, which is 1 in a black-red hybrid for a 2/2 creature bird dog horror that says 3 generic mana, return this card from your graveyard to your hand. It also has Madness, sacrifice an artifact. Red-black also has Annalise, Queen of the Vilebloods, which is black-red for a 2/1 legendary creature, Vampire Noble, that says when Annalise enters, create a blood token. You may cast Annalise from your graveyard by sacrificing a blood in addition to paying her costs. Red-black also has Bloodletting Beast, which is 4 black-red for a 5/5 creature beast horror with Menace that says whenever this creature enters or attacks, create a blood token. Then you may sacrifice 5 artifacts and or other creatures to transform it. On the other side, it's Parasite Beast, which is a 7/5 creature beast insect horror with Menace, and at the beginning of your end step, create X blood tokens, where X is the amount of life your opponents lost this turn. Green-blue is a deck built around communing with the Great Ones. It has Celestial Emissary, which is green-blue for a 4/4 legendary enchantment creature, Kin. As initial cost to cast Celestial Emissary, return a non-land permanent you control to its owner's hand or pay 2. It has Ward 1, and when Celestial Emissary enters, commune with a Briotas. Green-blue also has Fluorescent Flower, which is 3 green-blue for a 1/1 enchantment creature, Plantkin, with Vigilance, and when this creature enters, commune with a Briotas. This creature gets +1/+1 for each enchantment you control. Lastly, green-blue also has Imposter Yosefka, which is 2 green-blue for a 3/3 legendary creature, Human Shapeshifter. When Imposter Yosefka enters, commune with a Briotas or Flora. Enchantment creatures you control get +1/+1 and have trample. The green-black deck is built around Hunters, Hunt for Pale Blood, and Fighting. It has Yarnum Hunter, which is 2 in a black-green hybrid for a 3/2 creature Human Hunter. It has 3 generic mana, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. It gains Death Touch until end of turn. This creature also has Hunt for Pale Blood, which is at the beginning of your end step, if a player gained life and a player lost life this turn, create a Cold Blood token. And as a reminder, Cold Bloods are artifacts that have tap, sacrifice this artifact, add 2 colorless. This mana can't be spent to cast spells from your hand. Green-black also has Beastclaw Hunter, which is black-green for a 2/3 creature human hunter. It has Death Touch during your turn. It also has Hunt for Pale Blood that says at the beginning of your end step, if a player gained life and a player lost life this turn, you draw a card and lose a life. And lastly, Green-black has Gravekeeper Scorpion, which is 1 black-green for a 1/4 creature insect horror with Death Touch, and whenever this or another creature you control enters, you gain 1 life, and whenever this or another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. Red-green is all about Blood Moon and Insight. It has Beast Possessed Soul, which is 3 red-green for a 3/4 creature Beast Nightmare that says, when this creature enters, you may increase your Insight. Whenever this creature attacks, you may discard a card. If you do, this creature deals X damage to any target, where X is your Insight. It also has Mutated Dog, which is 1 and 2 red-green hybrids for a 3/3 creature Bird Dog Horror that says, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, increase your Insight. Lastly, red-green has Watchdog of the Old Lords, which is 5 red-green for a 6/6 creature elemental beast with trample and haste, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, increase your Insight. Then, this creature deals X damage to each opponent and each creature those players control, where X is your Insight. Now, I'd like to take a moment to talk about some important aspects of this set's design. First of all, I've mentioned this a couple times, but I just want to reiterate, this is meant to be a self-contained draft set. It is not meant for any constructed play, and it is not designed to be played with other cards. That being said, you can absolutely proxy these and slam them into commander decks, or even build whole commander decks around just these cards if you want to. No one's stopping you. Hell, I might even do that myself. Just know that the balance of these cards is not built around that. So if you experience some weird, wacky shit, it wasn't meant for that. It's built around a draft experience. They're balanced around each other, not the greater game of Magic the Gathering. So your mileage may vary. Of course, the power level of the set is nowhere near as broken as a Yu-Gi-Oh! Universes Beyond set, so it's much more likely to be safe. Another design element that I want to go over is how there are additional minor themes that play off of many of the other major themes as well. For example, Mono White has a life gain theme. This ties to the Hunt for Pale Blood theme nicely. And there are a decent number of Artifacts and Enchantments Matters cards that are not explicitly tied to any of the 2 color bears. Despite that, these play into the fact that many of the existing themes have enchantment creatures, or the fact that artifact tokens permeate this set with blood and cold blood alike. So as you draft the set, not only will you find that many of the 2 color pairs bleed into each other seamlessly, but also that monocolored decks are well supported and serve to easily incentivize unique decks. Always be on the lookout for a new build path in this set. Also, if you look at the file long enough, you may notice something unusual about the mix of common keywords used in this set. You have your classics like Haste, Vigilance, Trample, and Death Touch, as well as plenty of lifelink to assist with Hunt for Pale Blood. You'll see things like Affinity and Flashback that have begun to appear more frequently in standard Magic sets, but you might notice one ability that's missing. An ability that has been in every Magic set since the very beginning. Have you figured it out yet? I'll give you a couple of seconds. Comment what you think that ability is below. No cheating, and let's see how many of you get it right. Ready? It's flying. There is no flying in this set whatsoever. This is because there are so few examples of flying things in Bloodborne. Even the crows don't fly as they're too fat from all the corpses they eat. This made for an interesting challenge. Can I make a set with no flying? How can I compensate for lacking what is a fundamental part of a limited set design? Well, it certainly wasn't easy, but what I did was replace it with other evasion and a lot of attack triggers to incentivize getting into combat. The goal was to prevent board stalls that could inevitably result from lacking one of the most basic evasive abilities. You'll notice more Death Touch than usual, particularly Death Touch on your turn for attacking. You'll see more Trample, and the fact that Hunt for Pale Blood only works on your turn, pushing you to attack, particularly with lifelink creatures. And of course, I added a plethora of attack triggers, whether that be on creatures or things like the Carol runes, to make sure players are getting into fights and not just waiting around. I think the mechanics we came up with incentivize getting into combat so much that I never once noticed an issue that would normally result from missing flying. Even the great ones are designed such that you really want to be attacking. Also, the equipment of the set skew more aggressive, with far more power buffing than other stats. All in all, what I originally had thought would be an extremely difficult to pull off endeavor ended up going off without a hitch. Oh, and one more small thing you may notice when looking through the set is the number of activated abilities that cost generic mana only, rather than some generic and some color. This is because of the Cold Blood tokens. Similar to how Power Stones worked in the Brothers War set, these can only be used for certain things, including activated abilities. And to make sure that the Cold Bloods would be truly useful in this role, I followed WotC's lead and made sure they could cover a large majority of the costs of activated abilities. If you look back on Brothers War, you will notice a very similar thing was done with the activated abilities on cards in that set too. A large portion of them are full generic mana costs. Alright, so now you understand what this set is about, and you've seen a bunch of the cards this set has to offer. Hopefully this has enticed you into giving it a try. The community has playtested this a bunch and we've had a blast with these cards. They have changed a lot over time, and with the help of the community and their feedback, it should continue to do so. So, I want to take this moment to thank everyone in the community. We could not have done this without y'all. For those of you interested in playing this with the community, you can actually join our Discord because we draft every Thursday around 8 p.m. Central Time. But many people in the community are from other time zones and have been running their own drafts too, so even if you can't make our streamed draft, there will be plenty of people to play with you. All you need is Tabletop Simulator and to join our Discord. We also have a Google Drive folder with all the card images so that you can upload them to a printing website and print the set physically for you and your friends. If you want to print them on paper easily, you can use the PDF that's in the same folder as the image files. Just one thing to mention, if you're going to print the set off, print it as a cube draft. This means one of each card typically. However, with this set there are only 350 cards and typically a cube is 360 cards. To make up for this, you're going to need 2 copies of each of the 10 dual lands. This is intentional to help with mana fixing, but you'll only need 1 copy of every other card. Additionally, our file has the front and back face of the flip cards. You will need to either put in the images separately and print them out as separate cards, or if you're using a printing site, make sure you choose custom front and back for your cards and properly align the fronts with the backs. If you're having any issues with this process, there are plenty of people in Discord who are ready to assist. Just ask. And that's all I have, folks. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far, you are the GOAT, and I really hope you enjoyed this one. People like you are why I do this, so thank you again. Hope to see you in the Discord and on our streams. Later, friend.